Good. Thanks for waiting. Hello again for those who just joined. This is Mark speaking. Thanks for coming to this webinar about Patton eSBCs, how you can gain security and how you can save money. With me today, I have Tanya Barbeito. She is our marketing manager responsible for Western Europe. She is assisting me as usual for those who listened to some of our webinars already today. So
hello
Tanya.
Everybody. Hi.
Good. I think we can get started here. So as an introduction, why we're doing this webinar, as you know, we from Patton, we manufacture eSBCs since quite some time now, but the feedback we are getting from the market is usually, why should I use or why would I need an eSBC? So we said, as an answer to that, we want to highlight the values and the benefits an eSBC provides to you, to your clients in your network when it goes down to all IP. So all IP, the big thing, the big buzzword we hear every day. In order to start for this webinar here, I want to bring all to the same level of the architecture of what we are talking about here. So simplified, this is an all IP architecture we have or we see in many places today. So the SIP phones that are sitting on your desk or on your client's desks, they connect to the local area network, the Ethernet network, and they communicate with the IP-PBX that's on premise on one hand, or in a hosted scenario where the phones would be directly communicating with the hosted PBX sitting in the cloud provided by the Internet Telephony Service Provider. The protocol that's being used, it's SIP. It's everywhere SIP, as you can see here. It's between the phones and the PBX, but also to the ITSP, it's the same protocol. So really, as you can see, there is no SBC in this scenario, and that's a scenario that works. There is no problem with that. So technically, there is no need for an SBC. However, have you thought about security, survivability, or service quality? So in terms of security, SIP is the most used protocol as of today. Some of you might know H323, that's been used in the past, but that's going down or going away, which makes it really attractive for, let's say, the bad guys, for hackers, attackers, to go after the SIP protocol. On the graph, as you can see on the right-hand side, which we took from the SIP survey 2016, we see an increase in attacks which going after the SIP protocol. So these attacks, they are mainly going after toll fraud. So for the bad guys, they're doing phone calls on your bill, which results in like thousands of dollars you would see on your bill for phone calls you didn't do actually. Or it's in terms of denial of services, where let's say the bad guys are trying to bring the telephony infrastructure down of a certain company, so which will result in a loss of business and also in loss of money. So are you still convinced that you have enough security for your network?
I think so, Mark, because everybody nowadays has a firewall, right? So this helps us to secure also the network.
Yeah, that's true. So the firewall, that's really installed in all the cases, that's true. But firewalls, they're optimized for data traffic. Firewalls don't have enough performance to handle voice over IP traffic. And also, they don't really recognize the SIP protocol properly and also RDP traffic, which results in either call drops or one-way voice audio. So I would say firewalls cause more troubles than problems they solve.
Yeah, but hold on. Nowadays, all firewalls, or let's say most of them, have a SIP ALG function, which helps to secure VoIP traffic. So what do you say about that?
So the ALG, that's true. That feature exists, I think, on all the firewalls. However, as we've discovered it ourselves in our company, installing a firewall or a new firewall, as we did it recently, we've been using the ALG functionality, and it caused us a lot of trouble. So we've had complaints about calls that are being terminated after like 30 seconds or so. So we've had to bypass the VoIP traffic around the firewall, and we've used an eSBC. And interestingly, the same kind of thing we hear from the market, from customers, that they also have issues using the ALG functionality on firewalls.
Okay.
And in addition, what toll fraud is concerned, also the firewall won't really protect you from that. So as I've said before, it can cause your telephone bill to go up because of hack attacks going into your network and doing calls to foreign destinations or to service numbers, which causes your bill to explode at the end of the month, and the firewall won't protect you from that. So just to give you a number here or a comparison, in average, the amount of toll fraud damage is twice as damages caused by credit card fraud. So it's significant, and I think it's really something you should take care of to protect you or your customers from getting huge bills from the telecom company. So, however, with an eSBC, you can make sure, or you can prevent your system being hacked like this, to be a victim of toll fraud. So an eSBC has a back-to-back user agent, which separates the VoIP traffic from the WAN to the LAN. And in addition to that, it's having advanced functionalities in terms of call routing security and other security features. In terms of denial of service, the eSBC offers trusted peer functionality. That's sort of a whitelist, which makes sure that the eSBC is only allowed to communicate with the destination, which is your ITSP and no one else. And also it's having mechanisms implemented, which is for preventing if you are getting flooded by any attacks, so that your service is going down. So with that, the eSBC makes sure that the service, your service or the client service, stays up at a high quality. Another item is, or another topic is survivability. So let's think about of what's happening if, let's say, construction work is happening in front of your building. So as simple as that, it can cause your internet link to go down, which means your telephone system won't work anymore. In other words, your client or even yourself, you won't be reachable from the outside anymore using the landline infrastructure, which causes your company to lose money and business. However, with an eSBC, we can make sure that this is actually not happening. So we can't prevent from construction work that the line is being disconnected. However, we can make sure with an eSBC that you still would be reachable on the same number, and there is no redirect functionality required on the ITSP side that would go to your mobile phone, for instance. So still, you wouldn't even recognize on your phones that the main link went down, because we offer alternative uplinks through a 4G LTE link, for instance, as illustrated here.
So basically the same thing as our traditional gateways, right? They had a fallback to the PSTN, but now if we're moving to all IP, we still have the possibility to have a fallback line to a 4G LTE line, right?
Correct, exactly. So this year, there's no involvement there or required for ISDN. So really it's an all IP play, but still offers a high availability of the telephone service to the client. Now, high availability, that also goes along with quality of service. So still staying with the network we have here, imagine that you're getting your internet link from one provider, and the telephony service from another provider, so an over-the-top service provider, we call that. There is one thing you have to take care of, the bottleneck as illustrated here, which can cause voice calls to suffer from bad voice quality or even call drops in extreme cases. So really also here, the eSBC is making sure that the telephony service is getting high quality, whether it's for trunk solutions or for SIP hosted solutions. So just to give you an example of how this may look like, for instance, here in Switzerland, the internet service provider, Swisscom, let's say, is delivering you the data access, while the phone service you might be getting from PeoplePhone. Or another example, in Germany, you might be getting the internet link from Deutsche Telekom, while the phone service you would get, let's say, from QSC, for instance. So in such a case, if different services, which are all running on IP, are sharing the same line, it can cause quality drops for real-time traffic, which is voice. So the eSBC, again, here is providing priority to the voice packets. So, and also it's providing monitoring functionalities, which can even alert or act as proactive thing for high quality phone calls, so that your client won't suffer from a bad service in such a case.
But usually some customers may also have two links, right? One for data traffic and one for voice traffic. So you don't have this bottleneck issue.
That's correct. But still, you would have the security thing or the survivability thing, where it's still beneficial to have an eSBC, which is really the question, again, as we had at the beginning, do you really need an SBC? The answer is no. I mean, technically, you don't need it, but still you can do phone calls without an eSBC. Also, SIP phones provide security functionalities. Fiber access links, still, again, back if you're on the same link, having different services, they have a huge amount of bandwidth, which is enough for data and voice at the same time. But to be honest, and also what you heard before, SIP phones, they don't protect you against toll fraud, as this is happening in the network.
And also, I think if you have 10 SIP phones, you need to configure all 10 SIP phones for all security, right? So instead of configuring 10 SIP phones, you just need to configure the eSBC.
Exactly. So that also helps you to make the network less complex, it's easier to maintain, faster to deploy. So security-wise, you just would have to configure the eSBC once, and then you're done for the whole network. While as if you would configure all the phones, including the security functionality, this will cause a lot of time you'd have to spend on a client base. And still, with a lot of bandwidth, you could saturate a link with a lot of traffic if you're watching whatever YouTube videos in HD quality, for instance, or if you're doing large file transfers. So there, the voice traffic would suffer from that and would lose quality. And a second link provides you or your client from downtimes. So really, should you go for an eSBC? We think, yes, you better do so. It's really cheap compared to what phone bills you would get without having an eSBC. So we saw it before. We were talking about thousands of dollars. So with just a small investment of less than $500, you're secured for all these issues.
So $500 is list price, right?
It's a list price, yeah. Okay. So depending on the deal you have with your reseller, it might be even less than $500.
Spending $500 or spending $10,000 if I get hacked, right?
I think that's right. Exactly. Okay. It's a simple question, and the answer, I would say, is simple as well. So really, the smart nodes, the eSBCs, it's a smart choice for the SME. So it's a cost-effective solution compared, let's say, to the big guys. They have great products, but when it goes down to what an SME needs, we can cover all those needs with an eSBC that's reliable. And again, as you probably know, we manufacture those in the USA, so that's all in our hands, and it's Swiss engineered high precision. That's what we stand for.
So Mark, I have a question from Patrick asking, where will the eSBC place? In front of the firewall, behind, or beside the firewall?
Okay, so just could you repeat again? Sorry,
Sure.
I didn't got that.
Patrick is asking, where will the SBC be placed? In front of the firewall, behind, or beside the firewall?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it really depends on how your configuration, or let's say the service you're getting from your internet provider in terms of public IPs and so on. So we'd recommend to place it aside the firewall and assign a public IP to the eSBC. So that's causing a minimal effort for the install, and also to maintain, that's the best option. So if you're getting like a couple of public IPs, assign one to your firewall for your data traffic, assign one to the eSBC for your VoIP traffic.
Okay. So Gisbert is asking, can you share the PowerPoint so that we can use it to convince customers about the eSBCs?
Sure, that's what we're going to do. So for your information, the presentation we just had right now, it's going to be available. So just give us a couple of hours, you'll get an email with a link where you can download the presentation files. But also, as usual, we will make the recording of that webinar available on our website.
Exactly, and also for Gisbert, and I mean, a lot of distributors of us really asked us, how can we sell the eSBC? Really, it's not a mandatory, let's say, unit to have, but we really recommend nowadays that we are moving to the all IP, really because of this security features and survivability and quality of service. It is really important because some customers may just realize it when they get really bills about $10,000 for $10,000, right? So it's really recommendable to spend 500 or even less, really less, for an eSBC.
Right, and I think it's also a good way of avoiding any finger pointing from your clients. Let's say if they're getting hacked or if they're getting a huge bill, so you can avoid having them pointing at you, being the installer, saying we are not happy with your service. So with that, you can prevent like bad situation like this.
Okay, Gisbert is asking, can it work together with the network SBC from Acme? And is it additional value for the carrier? So
here we've addressed really the SME, let's say, segment. Of course, we can also, or of course, we're also delivering eSBCs to carriers. So where the carrier wants to have a service demarcation point at the customer premise where they can guarantee up to that point, up to the eSBC, that their service is at the high quality. So they won't be blind in terms of what kind of quality is arriving at the customer side for their VoIP service. So with the eSBC, they can. And in addition to that, they can also do SIP normalization, which they would have to do on like the big units, on the Acme SBC sitting at the customers, sitting at the network edge of the core network, which is maybe more complicated and is causing them more time to implement. So it's really service demarcation point, SIP adaptations for SIP normalization between IPPBX or SIP phones towards the large core side SBC or the soft switch.
Okay, and then Francesco is asking, does Patton SBC support also video calls?
Video calls, that's something which is on our roadmap. So up to date, it's not part of the offering we have. However, as you know, every 2 months we are providing new features free of charge to our products. And as I said, on the roadmap, we have video call support. I can't tell you a date right now, but you, buying a smart node eSBC right now, you would have the ability for a software upgrade at the later point in time where also video calls would be supported.
Yeah, and then one last question from Andreas asking, for security reasons, an eSBC makes only sense if you, sense if you have a scenario where you need to open zip listener ports or your NAT router, correct?
In terms of security, that was the question.
Yeah. For security reasons, an eSBC makes only sense if you have a scenario where you need to open zip listener ports or your NAT router, correct?
I'm not sure which direction this question goes, but that more sounds like configuring the router you have or the firewall in the right way, that it supports VoIP, that it supports ZIP and RDP in the first place. But in terms of security, you won't be protected by just opening the port. So you really, what it means, the door would be wide open for all that traffic to go through. Now, what the eSBC does, it's terminating that ZIP traffic, and that provides the availability to really look into whatever messages are coming in. If this is fraud messages, right messages, and making the decision based on that for the call to continue on the LAN side. So it's two different things. Opening the ports on the router, that's one thing, but there is no security on that, while the eSBC will cover both aspects.
Would you like to go for two other questions?
I think so. We can do. We still have some time.
Okay.
And afterwards, we also want to ask you some questions, ask the audience some questions. So let's go for the.
So Andreas is asking also, if you have a SIP phones or a SIP IPPBX that establishes a SIP trunk towards provider by sending a SIP register message, first, there are no open SIP ports on the internet side of the router required. So no need for eSBC.
I'm not sure I'm getting that right. So really, technically you can do that. So as Andreas said, but still you won't be protected from any fraud strikes coming from the internet. So that's really the point. Then again, on the security side, you can open the ports, you can do phone calls, even the register messages they will go through, even with NAT traversal functionalities. That's just helping to establish the conversation, but it's not providing you any security functionalities.
Okay, and then the last one from Francesco. Can we also manipulate SIP signaling in order to change source port on packet?
Yeah, that's all possible with the eSBC. So you can modify the ports. You can even modify the RDP port range if you want to do so. So to just shift away a little bit from the usual ports that are being used, the 5060 for SIP signaling. So that's all possible. You can manipulate that, but you can also modify and manipulate a SIP header in a sense of removing numbers, removing prefix or suspending prefixes, let's say. You can do a lot of things using the eSBC.
Okay. Then I would say just last question from Lawrence. Does Patton support the new HD Opus codec, and is it possible to do a transcoding between G722 to Opus?
So Opus, that's something we've got confronted with here and there from talking to clients. However, it's sitting on our roadmap. So we didn't see a high demand for the Opus codec, but in terms of transcoding, yes, that's possible. So we can do transcoding from G722 HD codec to G711, for instance. So that's supported on the eSBCs.
Perfect. Yeah, I think we will reply to all the other questions just right after the webinar, so that we have also enough time, as Mark said, to ask you 2 or 3 questions, right?
Good. Yeah, so let's go for the first question. So if you want to give us some answers there. I'll keep it open for some more seconds. So it looks like most of the people, they knew the advantages of having an eSBC. So that's good. So you're talking the same language as we do here. I'm glad to see this. Okay, so we had it 1 minute open. I'll close this one here now, and I'll just pull up the next question, which is, have you ever experienced problems in all IP scenarios? So the drawing you saw at the beginning, have you been confronted with problems where this is security related? So has your client or even yourself been hacked, or has there been issues in setting up an all IP service? So like all these things. Okay, so we have like half of the audience that voted. So we see that quite a lot of people are saying they were seeing some problems, but with an eSBC they were able to efficiently get rid of it. That's good to see. I'm glad to hear. Perfect. Okay, so I'll close that one as well. And just the last one before we close the session: which functionalities of an eSBC are the most valuable to you? So is it security functionalities, survivability, the quality of service, or the TDM interfaces, or is it something else?
Yeah, TDM interface. We haven't talked about that. We didn't inform our customers that we have eSBCs with TDM interfaces too.
Right, that's correct. So eSBCs, they come based on your selection. They can come with analog ports to connect fax machines. I think that's a use case we see quite often. Or for fallback survivability purposes, you could still connect a traditional PSTN line, whether it's E1, T1, or whether it's a BRI. So that's all possible. So it's more than just an eSBC. Actually, it's also TDM interfaces we have in our portfolio for eSBCs. Good. For our last question here to the audience, we see a trend on security features. It seems that's the most interesting, and I would also agree to that, because there is a lot happening out in the network. So I think it really makes sense to protect the environment, the infrastructure properly using an eSBC in order to avoid any surprises at the end of the month when you're getting the bill from your service provider. Thanks for that. Thanks for voting. So at that point, I think we're done. Time is almost up. Anything else we want to cover here, Tanya?
No, I don't think so. There are some few questions left, but we will send a reply just right after the webinar.
Sure. Yeah, we recorded all the questions, so we've noted them down. So give us a couple of hours to respond to you, and at that point, I think we can just say thank you for taking the time and listening to the webinar. We're looking forward to see you sometime soon for any upcoming webinars, and wishing you all a good and successful day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.